do you think that there's any potential that people's minds have been altered in terms of, in relation to the COVID shots and the mRNA vaccines?
Yes, 100%. Is all now peer-reviewed evidence. James Thorpe and colleagues identified over 80 safety signals for neuropsychiatric adverse events following these shots. Well, was up. Murderous activity was up. So literally homicidal behavior, suicidal behavior, depression, stroke, psychosis,
Shit.
Alzheimer's, dementia, cognitive impairment, all of this stuff was up. So that what that means is your blood-brain barrier is being disrupted, and these pathogens in your body, all these pathogens, spike protein, all this stuff is literally getting into your neurons, your neuronal tissue from through the blood-brain barrier because it's been disrupted. And so yeah, it's not good for it. It's very bad, and that could explain why some people who have taken so many of these boosters appear to have lost their mind.
Fantastic. Well, it's nice to meet you, Nick. It's I've been listening to a bunch of your bits and pieces of information that you've been putting over the interweb of things. So it's been really interesting to learn about you and discover some of your history. But I guess before we sort of get started into the nitty-gritty of what I really want to talk to you about, um, it's going to be no surprise to people that are, watching this in particular to see that you're, quite a young guy. I understand that you just got out of college not too long ago, and then you went straight into the McCullough Foundation. So can you talk to me about that? Like, how did that all come about?
Yes, yes. So in 2020, in 2020, when COVID hit, I was already pretty suspicious that there was something very wrong with what was happening in the world. And I say that because we saw these lockdowns, right? We saw all this stuff. Every country was acting in lockstep. They're all doing the same thing. And then we reach April 2020, we see they announce there's going to be a new vaccine. And they mentioned this vaccine would use genetic code to instruct your body to produce to become a protein manufacturing plant. So I was already very worried. And then as the time went on, and I was actually an undergrad in 2020, I graduated from university at the end of 2020 now, and I wanted to make a difference, right? So I thought, you know what? Why don't I go into public health, epidemiology? And so I went to University of Michigan School of Public Health, and that's really when all of this began because then I needed an internship. And this internship was should have been with a professor, right? It should have been a research project. And so I emailed every professor, about 50 of them. Now, one of them responded and gave me an opportunity. And I'm very thankful for that. In fact, I wouldn't be here today if any of them accepted my request. So because they all denied me, I reached out to Dr. Peter McCullough. I was following him. I was like, you know what? Maybe he has something. Maybe he has a research project. And he did. I emailed him. He responded in 5 minutes.
Yeah,
5 minutes with an entire study idea.
that's
And
great.
so, yeah, from then on, and that study was the systematic review of autopsy findings and deaths after COVID vaccinations. That was the very first study done at U of M, presented it to all the professors. I was warned I would not have a career if I continued to work with him. And so that's how it all transpired. And now here in 2025, I've now contributed to the publication of over 20 peer-reviewed scientific manuscripts exposing the harms of these injections.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, Peter McCullough is like what you just described is exactly my experience was over here in Australia, like going through the whole um, onslaught of like this is what's coming. It's hitting your shores, and we're going to release a vaccine very quickly. Just all of those red flags were going off, and I started to get worried myself. I was kind of like thinking my spidey senses were going off to say like this is just nothing about this is making any sense. Like, when I put my rational brain together with what I'm seeing in the public, it just didn't seem to compute. The two from the public message to what I was seeing in real life wasn't happening. So I started to speak out about it, and like yourself, ridiculed. Everyone was telling me, like, not unlike you, like I'm not educated like you in epidemiology or anything like that. So people go like, "What the fuck do you know, Adrian? Like, you just need to pull your head in and do the right thing. It's for the greater good." All of those slogans were already being used. So I reached out to Peter, the same as you, just finding something on the internet that was coming my way about this guy talking about spike proteins and about just how he was healing people from any kind of virus that was coming along and just telling him to get healthy. And I emailed him, and literally within, I don't know, it would have been between 15 minutes and 45 minutes, I got a response. And I'm on the other side of the world, right, Nick? So it's just like this guy was just like on the money straight away. Even now, like to connect us both, like he's just been just a real blessing to have around.
Definitely, definitely. He's been so fantastic, and because of people like him and people like yourself who were telling the truth when it really mattered, you know, that's why we're in this situation today. I think we would be in a much worse situation, if everybody was a coward. Now, I think we could, I know Australia, right? You guys still have some serious problems with these medical tyranny. Is that right?
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. I don't. I mean to ask you about that. I mean, maybe we can compare notes with what's happening in the US versus happening in Australia. What are you experiencing in terms of like, are more and more doctors speaking out? Or are they still sort of being gagged, much like our doctors here? They got to toe the line. They got to keep recommending the injections. I mean, we still have a portion of Australians who do believe that this is a very serious thing. We've still got news articles coming out to say that it's ramping up again. It's still prevalent. I was just speaking with someone yesterday in the health sort of industry. They do like cosmetic surgeries and things like that, and they were saying, yeah, look, it's still around. If you feel like you're unwell, wear a mask. I mean, this is fucking 5 years on, and they're like, this is the recommendation, but health industry at the moment, I personally know people that are vaccine injured, still working in the health industry. Their peers and their higher ups are experiencing vax injuries. They can't say anything, otherwise they're just going to be ousted. They can't say anything that's counter to what the health orders from 5 years ago are still being pushed now. We're still getting people getting one, two, three, four jabs. They're getting their flu shot and their COVID shot and measles shot all in one go. Like they're just giving mega doses of vaccines. So what's it like in the States?
Well, that's very worrisome to hear, very disappointing that, so many people are still under mass psychosis there.
Mhm.
But it is the case here as well. So I would say there's about 20% of the American population that's just like what you described. Now, about 80%, so the majority, are now very aware of all of these risks. They're very aware. They're refusing all these mRNA shots, right? Literally less than 20% are still taking them. So, and we also do see out of all the world governments, or out of all of the developed nations, right? It appears that America is making the most positive steps against this mRNA technology, at least in what it appears, because we did cancel a majority of the mRNA injection contracts that were where they were developing this future iterations of mRNA shots, they're canceling that. They just revoked the universal recommendation. Now it's under shared decision making, which obviously is still not enough, but that's much better than still a blanket recommendation to every single person to get these products. So the situation in America is much, much, much better, but there are still a lot of people that are very, very much lost their minds and they're still lining up for their seventh booster shot and bragging about it because now they're trying to spite RFK here, right? Because whenever RFK or Trump says something, like don't get this vaccine or this vaccine's dangerous. They go on social media and they show themselves getting the shots, saying like trying to brag that they got it despite the limited access. So it's just ridiculous what's going on here. But
Mm.
um, I'm positive for the future at this time for America.
Yeah, that's good to hear. What do you think about the new administration with me? You mentioned RFK. Some of the concerns from an outsider looking in is, I guess, you realize just how big a machine this pharmaceutical company is because RFK for many years has been promoting that the vaccines are not safe and effective, and he's been on that bandwagon, particularly when it comes to children, autism, and things like that. When I had him on this show back in 2021, he had just finished the book on the real Anthony Fauci. So fast forward to today, though, you can just see that his tune is changing. And, you mentioned that America is not promoting the use of mRNA vaccines and they're canceling contracts. However, we do have the spruiking of the cancer mRNA vaccine that is, that was straight out of RFK's mouth. Like, what are your thoughts on that? Are you sort of dubious as to whether he himself has been placed under a bit of a gag order? He has to toe the line to some respect as well.
Yeah, I think he does have to toe the line. Unfortunately, you're right. They have many other mRNA up the pipeline for cancer, for just simply gene editing, right? Gene therapy. All of this stuff is still going full speed ahead. And so, yeah, that's worrisome. And because we know the mRNA cancer so-called vaccines, they're going to be a disaster. They're going to cause cancer. They're going to make cancer worse. It's just
Yeah.
more experimental garbage. It failed. We saw it. They administered billions of doses for this to produce the spike protein. When it's going to produce these cancer antigens or whatever it's going to produce, it's going to be the same problems, the
Mm.
same dangers, the same biodistribution. So yeah, he's. It appears they're tipping the line. They're trying to be careful as what has to be realized is all these people, all of these like workers at the CDC, the public health agencies, like kind of the lower level workers, um, they hate RFK. They hate the leadership, and so they won't follow directives that are issued and like so literally they'll tell them something and they won't do it, and so that's the situation here. It's like it's very difficult to get certain things through, but yeah, that's what I would say. It's tipping the line. It's going slow. It is a snail's pace,
Yeah.
and it's not as much as we would like to see.
It's super
um
frustrating.
yeah.
You'd like to see that someone in that role would have the ability to just, at the stroke of a pen, cancel and stop everything in its tracks for the sheer number of information and data that you've got at the moment to back up that none of these therapies have been effective at all in reducing any kind of spreading of disease or whatever. In fact, they're increasing the spreading of disease. When I spoke to Dr. William Mackus, he was talking about using mRNA vaccines for cancer in the 90s. Like it was a long time ago that I think either late 90s or early 2000s, that he was using mRNA vaccines, and he said, and it just didn't work. And when he started to speak out about it, he was ousted from the industry and had his license revoked and cancelled and all the rest of it. So it is not a new thing, and it's something that has been tested and measured a long time ago to not work. But like you were saying before, and I think this would be a good segue to help people and even myself understand how it's possible for the increase of disease, right? So, I mean, you're obviously at the coalface of this, but I can tell you from just consumer sentiment, the information that I receive, the messages that I get, the conversations that I have, the conversations that I overhear, just at a cafe, for example. It's just people are from a very simple I've had a cold or I've had a chest infection for months, right? They just cannot seem to shake any kind of viral infection or a respiratory infection. They can't shake it for months and months and months. And as soon as it seems like it's going away, it comes back. These people are very, very sickly. Every couple of months, they got something. They've got gout. They've got ringing ears. They've got like I said, just chest infections and they're down and out. Yesterday at a cafe, I was speaking to one of the owners there. He said his mum's 79. She's got three types of cancers, like all at once. I don't understand this, like the rate of acceleration in terms of disease, particularly with cancers and turbo cancers and things like that. So, can we speak to that a little bit to help me understand exactly how this is happening and what is happening in the human body at the moment to make these diseases so rampant?
Yeah, the whole world was poisoned, right?
For sure.
Literally, and especially everybody who took these mRNA inoculations. It initiated molecular chaos starting at the transcriptomic genetic level. And so that's why we're seeing all this stuff. But when you talk about turbo cancers, yeah, like you said, people developing, they have two, three cancers kind of pop up out of nowhere, right? We saw that with some like Formula One racer recently, some 19-year-old kids diagnosed with lung and brain cancer, and they're two distinct cancers, right? It's like, where are these coming from? Well, there's now so much abundant evidence, so much now published peer-reviewed studies documenting these increased cancer risks after mRNA technology. Recently, the first ever population study that tried to assess cancer risks found, about 23% increased risk of all types of cancers, cancer hospitalizations in the mRNA vaccine group. And remember, this was over 300,000 people in this study followed for 30 months. And also, it increased their risks of breast cancer, colorectal cancer, bladder cancer, leukemia, lymphoma, right? So they just suffered all these cancer hospitalizations. And so the population level tells us why. And then the experimental data. Recently, we identified the first instance of genomic integration of mRNA vaccine genetic material
Mm.
in a stage 4 bladder cancer patient. So we know this genetic code is getting in there, it's staying in there, and it's causing havoc at the molecular level, turning on a bunch of genes that accelerate cancer and turning off tumor surveillance genes, P53 and BRCA. So all of a sudden, these tumors can't be checked anymore. Your body doesn't know how to identify them. And then they just kind of spawn. They kind of grow uncontrollably. You get hyperinflammation, which cancer loves inflammation, and all this stuff. You get the perfect storm for cancerous activity from these mRNA inoculations. And the spike protein also interferes with cancerous or cancer related genes. And so you have so many things going on. And yeah, it's clear these shots are carcinogenic.
Yeah, wow. So can you explain the correlation, or is there any relationship between the spike protein and SV40 with relation to the turbo cancers?
Yeah. Well, nobody's documented direct evidence of the SV40 promoter integrating into individuals. But we do know it is cancer promoting, right? We do know that this sequence is it's very bad. It's very bad for the body, especially when it's encapsulated in lipid nanoparticles, gets into your nucleus, right? This is not good. But so what I can say is from our study, we did document. So the part that integrated into this individual's genome was part of the DNA plasmid, right? And so that DNA plasmid at the manufacturing plant, where they use to churn out the mRNA, it stays in the vials, right? And so, like you mentioned, SV40 is part of that plasmid. The spike open reading frame region is part of that plasmid. So all fragments, these sequences of this plasmid are in the vials, and any one of them can insert themselves into your DNA. And
Wow.
so we just don't know how frequently, we don't know in how many people this is happening. And all these people who develop turbo cancer, we don't really know how much of it transponds to SV40 or these other DNA plasmids. Nobody's investigating any of this except a few labs, including the McCullough Foundation, including the O7 Bioscience, Medicinal Genomics, Kevin McKernan. No, I mean, there's really nobody else looking. And so, we have our government agencies with billions of dollars. They should be looking at this stuff, this existential, disastrous stuff of literally now we have humans with chimeric genomes with non-human segments of code in it. This is a very serious situation.
Wow. Can you explain that to me? What's the non-human segments?
Yes, so when you have a portion of a vaccine or a mRNA injection,
Mhm.
when you have the spike open reading frame region of this plasmid literally fuse into chromosome 19, fuse into your chromosome, so that means you have in this DNA, in these sequences, you'll have human sequence, boom, it keeps going, and then you'll get to all of a sudden non-human spike protein encoding sequence, and then after that you're back to human. So the DNA becomes chimeric with this spike encoding sequence from the DNA plasmid of the vaccine. So yeah, that is classified as non-human. Now, does that mean you're an alien? No. Does that mean you're going to grow, four legs and three arms? No. It just means you're going to suffer severe genetic dysregulation and likely cancer. And so it's not a
Wow.
good thing.
No, definitely not. So does that mean from if you have a genetic alteration, it's one of these things that I think has been touted as, more of a conspiracy theory than anything, to say that this vaccine has altered people at a DNA level. But that, in my mind, must mean that that gene can also be passed on, right? So if you have a child, and wouldn't that genetic code be passed down to the child as well? Like, is there a potential for that gene to be passed on and to be replicated human to human?
Yes, yes, of course. And it's not a conspiracy anymore. So if anybody's watching this, they think it's conspiracy. It's not. Our paper. Remember, this is all documented in a literal manuscript, like a scientific manuscript. It was just accepted for publication after successful peer review. This is all real stuff, and so
Mhm.
that's why people they have to start paying attention. But so yeah, this can likely, if it does integrate into the genome, it could likely and expectedly transfer to offspring as well, right? We don't know. This hasn't been directly documented, but it's very plausible, and it could possibly explain why we're seeing an excess infant mortality crisis. Now, at least here in the US, babies are dying at 77% excess
Wow.
even in 2025. They're dying of the same causes from the vaccine that's killing people. I mean, it's crazy. And then you have in the UK excess infant mortality skyrocketing. So babies are dying. Regulatory authorities claim to not know why, but it's very obvious that most of those mothers were inoculated with gene transfer technology. So yeah, we got to. I mean, this is the signals as each week passes. We do identify more concerning signals from this campaign.
Yeah, absolutely. So what are you seeing with your research into the mRNA vaccines in terms of how long it's staying in the body, how long it starts to it continues to reproduce the spike proteins and things like that. What are you seeing at the moment through your studies?
Yeah, so we have a few case reports now. Um, we're preparing them for publication. We're doing the studies now. We have a few patients that are undergoing immense testing, molecular testing, and in one of them, we identified. So this individual received Pfizer injections, I believe two of them, and he got myocarditis, right? The classic cardiovascular symptoms. He developed pulmonary embolism. He has neurological adverse events. He has skin adverse events. He's got multi-system post-vaccination syndrome, and so we looked. Is any of this vaccine genetic material, is spike protein still in them? And yes, it's now been over 3 years since those shots. We're still finding the synthetic spike protein, literally the Wuhan variant, right? That was the one in the original shots based on from the Wuhan lab. The Wuhan spike fragments are still circulating in his exosomes in his blood. We found DNA plasmid material, spike DNA plasmid material in his skin
Hmm.
again over 3 years after the injection. So now we're doing some genetic sequencing to see if it actually integrated into his genome. So and there's so many other instances. I mean, we have so many other studies out there that corroborate this, like the Yale study that found spike in somebody like 709 days after injection, right? So this stuff does not go away on its own. It doesn't, it may in some individuals, but it's very, very long lasting. And we don't know if it's permanent, right? If it's still in people this far after, it could be permanent in some individuals.
Yeah, for sure. Well, do you think, Nick, that this technology that people have injected themselves with or had themselves injected with is affect? You mentioned like neurological implications. Do you think that from a psychological perspective, it's having an effect on people? I don't know if it's just something that I'm noticing myself. I've heard a few people kind of have a similar sentiment that people just don't seem themselves and they seem like they're I don't know, angrier. I don't know how to explain it, but they just seem more hostile. Yeah, a lot of people are more checked out. I just don't know whether that's an environmental factor. It's because there's just so many things coming at us left, right, and center over the last 5 years. If it's not this, COVID experience, it's a war. If it's not war, it's an economic climate change, a climate change. Like, is there's all of these natural disasters and things that are going on. So there's a lot to process at any one time. Cost of living, all of this kind of stuff is having an effect. But do you think that there's any potential that people's minds have been altered in terms of, in relation to the COVID shots and the mRNA vaccines?
Yes, 100%. Because again, this is all now peer-reviewed evidence. This is all
Really?
documented. Yeah, there's a study by Dr. James Thorpe and colleagues identified over 80 safety signals for neuropsychiatric adverse events following these shots. Looked at the VAERS system, and so we had, I mean, it was crazy what sort of safety signals were identified. And what that means is so they look in the VAERS system and they see how much more often are these adverse events reported with the COVID shot compared to the flu shot, right? And that will tell you, is there a safety signal? Well, they found schizophrenia was up, murderous activity was up. So literally homicidal behavior, suicidal behavior, depression, stroke, psychosis,
Shit.
Alzheimer's, dementia, cognitive impairment. All of this stuff was up. And that was just that study. Then we have studies by, one's by Rowe and colleagues from Korea, found increased risks of mild cognitive impairment and Alzheimer's among like 500,000 older adult Koreans. We had another one out of Korea that found increased risks of depression, anxiety disorders, sleep disorders, um, all these things. I think it was even sexual dysfunction, all these things. And so it's all corroborated now. And then recently, we just put out a study, McCullough Foundation, where we identified severe blood-brain barrier disruption from mRNA shots. And what that means is we looked at the VAERS system. We identified massive safety signals for central nervous system infections. So that what that means is your blood-brain barrier is being disrupted, and these pathogens in your body, all these pathogens, spike protein, all this stuff is literally getting into your neurons, your neuronal tissue from through the blood-brain barrier because it's been disrupted. That's what explains why you see that. And then you also see demyelination syndromes. So basically your neurons, the myelin sheath on the neurons becomes dysfunctional, starts to wither away. And then you get all sorts of problems. We see the brain and spinal cord abscesses. So you get these pus-filled lesions in the brain and spinal cord.
Wow.
We see paralysis, and we also see signals for prion disease, the human equivalent of mad cow disease. So, I mean, this is all very serious and very
Oh.
bad stuff for the neurological system. And so, yeah, it's not good for it. It's very bad, and that could explain why some people who have taken so many of these boosters appear to have lost their mind. But you're right, it's not just that. It's all the societal things. People have been demoralized over the past few years, that is for sure.
Yeah. That's super scary, actually. I mean, it does explain a lot of activity that's been going on like worldwide, and I think you can just see the amplification of almost mind control. Like it's not almost, it is. It's a form of mind control. And I think when people's brains and psyche are susceptible to all of those things that you mentioned anyway, then it seems like that yeah, they would be the first to suffer some kind of yeah, I don't know, like a almost like a how do I put this? Yeah, they're going to be persuaded to do something that is not themselves. So yeah, it's pretty intense. I know on another podcast you mentioned that there was a study between the unvaccinated and the vaccinated. And I'm curious to get your take on that in terms of what that means for chronic illness and disease that you're seeing. Was it just in America, or like, can you kind of go into that for me a little bit?
Yeah, that was just in America. That was at a hospital system in America, a single one. They tracked about 18,000 uh, babies from when they were born up until about age 10. So it was about a 10-year follow-up period. It's what's called a birth cohort study.
Hmm.
So again, follow people from birth. This is one of the best ways to assess causal links. So again, very strong study design. And so what was the ended result? Well, there's about 3,000, 2 to 3,000 unvaccinated people, children that never got a vaccine, and then you had, the rest, about 16,000, did get fully vaccinated, or at least received one vaccine, I believe was the criteria. So the findings were very shocking, but also expected. So 17% only 17% of the unvaccinated children had a chronic disease by age 10. And then in the vaccinated group, um, 60% had a chronic disease by age 10, right? So, I mean, it's crazy. And then also in the vaccinated group, it wasn't just chronic disease. So they faced increased risks, about 200 to 600% increased risks of neurodevelopmental disorders, of tics, speech delays, of asthma, of just autoimmune diseases, of skin diseases, right? All of this stuff was just so drastically increased in the children who received vaccines. So this study kind of just shows that, yeah, when this is the consequence of injecting, 60 to 70 doses of toxic loads into small developing children. That's what happens. We should have thought this would have happened the whole time, but the vaccine industry doesn't care about the health of our children.
Yeah, that's for sure. They don't care about the health of anyone. They care about their bottom line and how much money they're making for themselves and their shareholders. That's clear. Um, so can we switch gears to some of your findings? Because I know when I spoke to Peter a little ways ago, he was talking about his protocol and some of the things that he was doing to help people um, become healthier. And I've heard you mention a bunch of things on other podcasts about becoming healthier, which is it's almost redundant in a way to say eat healthy, get more sunlight, exercise. Like these are all things that again throughout the pandemic, I that's what I was saying. I was like, why are they handing out free vaccines and telling you to stay indoors? Why aren't they handing out free vitamin packs? Right, and opening up gyms and providing free gym membership or some shit like that. Like they were doing everything that was opposite of being healthy, right? But yeah,
Exactly. Yeah.
can we talk to uh, any kind of results and findings that you're having from the McCullough protocol? And is there anything else that you're discovering that is helping people get healthier?
Yeah, well, like you just mentioned, we can go through the same things. You want to go through the full spiel?
Yeah, yeah, go for it.
Okay, okay, yeah. So, yeah, it's obviously key that you need to be healthy. You need your body to be healthy and in a, not a diseased state to begin with. And if you do that, then your outcomes will be improved with a vaccine injury, right? It's just, I mean, that's just common sense. So, there's two studies that identified the vital importance of ensuring adequate vitamin D levels, right, for vaccine injuries specifically. They looked at myocarditis patients, they looked at long vaccine patients, and in the injured individuals, first of all, it was common to have very low vitamin D levels, way below adequate. What they showed is when they raised those levels, all of the symptomology improved, right? There was less hospitalizations. They had improvements in cardiac function and less deaths, right? So it improved that for myocarditis, but also improved and almost all of the long vaccine patients with chronic fatigue syndrome, when they raised those vitamin D levels, almost all of them improved in the study. It was about 60 people. So the best way to raise those levels is sunlight, right?
Yeah.
Because then you get all the other benefits of sunlight as well, including all the mitochondrial gene expression, circadian rhythm benefits, right? So you want to get that from sunlight. That's critical. And so that's a key pillar. But yeah, diet, right? You can't be eating Doritos, 24/7. You can't be staring at a screen 24/7 and never moving. You need movement, you need exercise. A recent study found 7,000 steps a day now is adequate to decrease your risk of all cause mortality, cancer death, diabetes, heart disease, dementia, right? All this stuff that the mRNA shots contribute to, um, those risks can decrease with daily movement.
Mhm.
So that's all critical, all the base stuff. But yeah, then we get to the targeted interventions. So yeah, Dr. Peter McCullough did come up with the protocol-based spike detoxification. So this is three natural enzymes: nattokinase, bromelain, and curcumin. And we have a few papers published on this outlining the whole rationale. We have a few case reports documenting improvements in vaccine injuries. We have researchers even out of Japan using some of this, documenting improvements in thrombotic syndromes from the vaccine. So nattokinase has been shown directly in the test tube to degrade the spike protein, right? We know it reaches systemic circulation when you take it orally. So it's very plausible that this can help the body rid of this persistent protein. Then we have bromelain, same mechanism, helps digest proteins, including the spike protein. And then you have curcumin, which is a potent anti-inflammatory, which these spike proteins and frame shifted proteins induce hyperinflammation. So you kind of want to try and control that. But the curcumin also does block the spike protein from binding to human cells. So all those three combined are the base of that protocol. And yeah, again, we have so many case reports documenting improvements. Now, we need large scale randomized double blind placebo controlled trials to really assess efficacy. We need accessible spike protein tests to be able to measure, right? To see, okay, they have this level now, and then you give them the intervention, and oh, did it decrease or not? But our FDA here has refused to authorize any such tests. So there's many barriers to kind of assess efficacy of removing that. So that's the next steps. But yeah, so far, seeing improvements, and Dr. McCullough sees improvements clinically in his patients.
Yeah, right. Do you have any evidence or have you looked into cleaning the blood and getting rid of any kind of like those, what's it called, the nanolipid particles and all those sorts of things? Is that something that you've looked at or you've heard about?
Yeah, that shows a lot of promise, right? That does show a lot of promise in kind of cleaning out the blood, right? To kind of filter out all the toxins through some sort of filter machine. I know they're using that for microplastics in the blood, right? That appears to actually work in removing microplastics from circulation. So it may very well show some efficacy for removing some of these vaccine components. Now, we have no clue if it will because there's no data that I'm
Yeah.
aware of on it.
Hmm.
But that does show a lot of promise. Needs to be tested, and many that really should because that is a great idea in assessing some of this stuff. But again, we have to remember it's not just in the blood, right? This mRNA material, vaccine material, it reaches the brain, it reaches the heart, it reaches the reproductive system, and so we need ways to kind of extract it from these vital organ systems as well.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's a whole other challenge. Um, just finally, what are you seeing in the States as far as like retribution and yeah, having people being held accountable? I mean, I noticed that Fauci was pardoned, and I know there's a couple of cases going on at the moment that are trying to, I don't know, figure out a workaround that could be overcome in a sense of some of the crimes against humanity are being yeah, he's been accused of. So what are you hearing and what do you know about that's happening in the States at the moment?
Yeah, they're going after Fauci at the moment for the basic things, the obvious things such as, perjury, lying to Congress, lying under oath, right? They're going after him for that. They're going after him for telling people to delete his emails, right? That's recently been uncovered. So, I think he will face some sort of prosecution shortly at this point because we now see in America they're all of a sudden issuing indictments for all sorts of people very recently, and so it wouldn't surprise me if Fauci begins isn't included in this wave of indictments
Mm,
because it's they've documented all the evidence. Now there's so many other things that have happened, so many other crimes that have been committed that are much more serious than perjury, such
mhm.
as suppression of early treatments, mass negligent homicide, right? So suppressing life-saving medicines in favor of a dangerous and experimental product, right? So that's very bad. Now there is a law group called the Vyers Law Group here in America that has actually filed criminal referral requests in 7 U.S. states against Anthony Fauci and other top COVID officials for various things, including, and this is so they allege that Fauci and these others have committed uh, fraud, abuse, murder, even terrorism, right? This is what they accuse them of, and they have evidence of over 300 victims that were literally abused and murdered in the hospitals due to these ill-advised protocols. And so that's one initiative underway here, but yeah, we haven't seen any accountability so far for the pandemic crimes. And we really hope accountability comes soon because if there is never accountability, the same people are going to do the same things, right? And we'll be in another horrible situation in the future.
Yeah. It's the same here in Australia. Unfortunately, I think that, I mean, when you liken the, like say Fauci to our health ministers here in Australia and things like that, that's only one layer. Like at the end of the day, they were given so many orders as far as the public health initiative was concerned, but then there's so many layers. Like we haven't discussed anything against Pfizer or Moderna. We haven't discussed anything on a, like you said, on a hospital level of here in Australia. And even recently I know with a family member who passed away from cancer last year was put on a ventilator. He was tested as he got into hospital. He had days to live, tested positive for COVID, was put on a ventilator and was given remdesivir, whatever that drug is, and had COVID-19 listed as his cause of death. And this guy had
Mm.
been suffering from cancer for like 4 years. So it's still very prominent here in Australia, and a lot of our admission of guilt and health orders that were just based on nothingness, really, like no scientific evidence to support that masking or distancing or lockdowns, which I think was probably the most severe social impact in terms of locking kids out of school, shutting down businesses. My business was shut down for 9 months, and it's eventually had to close it down because it was just hemorrhaging money. So a lot of that, I mean, yeah, I'm still fucking salty about it, Nick. Like I don't want to ever let this go, and I want to seek retribution and compensation. I think a lot of and I feel like I come out unscathed, like because I've still got my health, my kids are still safe. They're still very healthy. So I'm feel like I'm one of the lucky ones, but there's a lot of people out there that uh, have either lost their lives or their lives have been significantly impacted by this whole debacle.
Yes, people's lives have been ruined. They've been ruined. People's health has been ruined, has been destroyed, right? So many lives are now finished. So many families have been permanently impacted, permanently separated due to deaths and permanent disabilities
Hmm.
and injuries, right? It's a very, very bad thing. And yeah, the monetary thing is serious. When they locked everybody down, you know, prices for food are still up, right? It's still like we'll go to a store now and you buy toilet paper, paper towel, a few apples. It ends up being like $100. So it's become absolutely ridiculous.
It
And
is.
yeah, so people can't afford as much. They now have higher medical costs because they've been injured, right? They're now chronically ill from these mRNA injections, and the government just ignores them. And
Mm.
so yeah, this has been catastrophic. It has been catastrophic, and So that's why we have to reverse this situation. Governments have to start acknowledging it. We have to start finding treatments for people. We really do.
Mm. Yeah, we need to speak up and speak out a lot louder than what we have. I think it still comes down to, yeah, from a grassroots level, it's going to come back to the individual making enough noise. I still think there's a large part of the population that, and I fit into this category somewhat, although I do speak out a lot and I interview people like yourself all the time that like I've still got my life to live. I've still got to work and make a living. I've still got to pay rent, buy food, put petrol in the car and all the rest of it. So like there's only so many hours in the day that you can kind of like make a difference. But I think if collectively, as esoteric as it sounds, we all put our heads together and start working towards one common goal. And I really feel that there's no doubt that there is, a very few common enemies that we all have in this whole, fight for our health and a better future for ourselves. And we kind of need to stop talking like pointing the blame at each other, whether it be immigration or this race or that ethnicity or this religion or whatever it is, and start focusing on these people that are the true criminals in this whole scenario. You know what I mean?
Right, right. Yeah, we got to pay attention to who's really making these horrible decisions, who's really harming all these people. You're
Mm.
right. That's something critical. We can't keep, biting each other's necks off
That's
um,
right.
when when the real enemy is not your neighbor. It is
Yep.
not your neighbor. It is the person that has stoked the divide between you and your neighbor.
Mm.
And usually these divides are ideological, tribalistic, right? Kind of doesn't make much sense when you think of it at a higher level, right? It would just be now degenerated into only focusing on this tribalistic aspect, and that's got to change. People have to come together
Mm.
and just and be nice to each other, right? And but it's become very difficult,
Yeah.
particularly in recent years.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's a lot going on, but I think there is a hope. I do resonate with what you said earlier about there is optimism in my heart of hearts. I think that eventually people will get to a tipping point, and I feel like it's a slow burn, but we're getting to that kind of real pointy end at the moment where I think people are going to start to say, what enough's enough. We realize that there is a better world for all of us to be living in, and if we don't work together, then it's just not going to happen. So we need to kind of yeah, unite and work together as one. But Nick, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Can you tell the listeners where to go to find out more about your work and the work that you're doing? I know that the McCullough Foundation receives public donations to support your work that you're doing and things like that, and so they can read some of the papers and the literature you're putting out.
Yes, yes. Well, yeah, for sure. We operate on donations. We have so much stuff in the pipeline, so much stuff investigating autism and more mRNA harms, treatments for the vaccine injured, right? We have so much up the pipeline, and it all runs on the people's support, right? We are not a for-profit company. We're not selling anything. So if you want to support our mission, go to mcculloughfnd.org and you can make a contribution. And to follow our work, you can go to thefocalpoints.com. That is our Substack publication with Dr. Peter McCullough, John Link, and myself. We put out articles on a daily basis in depth on all the latest breaking public health news. And you can also follow my personal X account at Nick Hulscher, and I post there daily as well.
Awesome. I think it's been great to talk to you, man. I really appreciate your time. Thank you for everything that you're doing. And yeah, hopefully we can circle back with some more positive news in the future. Okay.
All right, awesome. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure, mate. Talk soon.